All right, another episode of Square and Compass podcast. I am. I've talked to this worshiper brother for a little while, and I've got him on the podcast now. Worship brother Laurent Khaiat. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, worshipful Cameron.
So I had the chance actually to. Well, I've had a chance to meet with you in person a couple times. We met in San Francisco at the Grand Lodge annual communication, and then also a couple days ago for Los Angeles Lodge's number 42. You had a double a second degree, which went terrific. Start by talking to us about that. Just as worshipful master, what did you think about the degree, how your lodge did, how the candidates did, and just that night in general?
Well, that's kind of simple. The candidates were obviously clueless of what was going to happen to them, but that's normal. They went through the entire rituals perfectly. The officers' cast was incredible. I think we did a fantastic double second degree from the east to all the officers did a fantastic job overall.
Did you guys have any, or what type of preparation was done? Were there practices done by Los Angeles Lodge, or just because I agree, I was very impressed with the caliber of work. So it made me think there must have been some practices and a lot of, I mean, putting on a degree, as every master knows, right? There's a lot of coordination that goes into it.
Well, what we do as LA42, I always set up a one practice the week prior for that particular degree. So I'll make sure that all the officers are know their work, know their footwork, know their words for whatever degrees we're putting on the following week. So this was a second degree, so we had a practice on a second degree the week prior.
And that's something I've not really discussed with any guests before. How important is it as a worshipful master? How important is it, do you think, for lodges to regularly practice their work, their degrees, both members individually, practicing in the mirror or on the toilet as the time-honored Masonic tradition, or for lodges to get together and practice as a group?
I think it's the utmost important. The degree is not for us, the officers. All the officers are all Master Mason, obviously. So it is pretty much for these candidates. And each degree, doesn't matter if it's first standard apprentice, fellow craft, or Master Mason, that needs to be done perfectly. I mean, there's no perfect degrees. There's always an error here or there, or a word missing here or there. But overall, we try to do as best as possible on all degrees. I think that's most important, to make sure the candidate receive 100%.
And I, have you, since the degree night, spoken with the candidates about their experience? I know that I talked to them a little bit afterwards, and they obviously were very impressed with the work done. And the nice thing about a good degree is it makes the candidates look forward to the next one, which is what you want. You want to keep them moving through. But I mean, just did you speak to the candidates after the degree, and if so, kind of what were their thoughts on the degree?
Oh, they really enjoyed it. They obviously had no idea what was going to happen to them, but they had a little bit of idea because they've already done the first degree, so they kind of knew about the ritual. So when you first do to a candidate an entered apprentice degree, they completely have no idea what's going to happen to them. When you move on to a second or third degree, they have a little idea without knowing what will happen during the ritual. But the candidates were very happy with the degree, and obviously your lecture on a second degree tool, Canadian tools, was excellent too from the East. So I think the candidate had a great experience with that also. And our lodge members had a great experience on that also. We have never heard it before, so this was something new for us. So we appreciate it. Thank you very much.
I appreciated the opportunity. It's my favorite lecture, and the chance to exemplify it in a American Lodge. Definitely a Masonic highlight. Not only an American Lodge, but a California Lodge, which I've never had the chance to visit before. Closest I came to was at Grand Lodge. Tell us a bit about your Masonic experience. Did you join Freemasonry within California? Are
Well,
you a
yeah,
member
it's
of
very
multiple lodges? Or
yeah, it's very simple for me. I wanted just got the idea of becoming a Freemason. And while I was playing golf in France, in Paris, I asked a friend of mine who I was playing golf with out of the blue, and he said, I'm a Freemason. But I cannot really help you because I live in France and you live in California. So I was stuck in my mind, like, what do I do next? And when I came back to Los Angeles, again, I was playing golf in Orange County with another friend of mine, and I started talking about Freemasonry, and he said, "Oh, I'm a Freemason." I said, "Wow." He said, "Let me help you out." So he looked around near where I live, found a lodge, kind of like what you're supposed to be doing actually, near you, and then he contacted the director of membership, and we met a few times having coffee at Starbucks or whatever, and we talked. He asked me a bunch of questions, and we talked and talked more. He's a very nice man, very talkative, but a very nice man. And then I was invited to come to the lodge, and for stated meeting dinners only. Obviously, I cannot attend the business meeting. And after a few times, I was given an application and became a Mason. The good thing about me is I always love to study and to learn, and I kind of learn fast. So, my lodge in America, I mean, at least in California, we have two types of forms for proficiency. We have short form and full form. And full form is the entire book that it's given to you after a degree that you have to learn by memory. And the short form is just your obligations that you have to learn by memory. My lodge, my mother lodge, which I have demitted since, never told me that you have short form. So it seems like every candidate that goes through that particular lodge only learn full form, which is obviously much better. But our books is written in Ciphron, so unless you learn how to read Ciphron writings, it takes time. So I went through the degrees very fast. I learned very fast. So, and obviously the full form on all three degrees. But I went through my first degree in a month because I had to learn how to read Ciphron. And I went through my second degree in 2.5 weeks and my third degree in 2.5 weeks. So it was very, very quick. I didn't know I had such a good memory, but I guess I do. And from then on, they put me right through as junior steward. Hey, get to work. And then senior steward, and then moved on to junior deacon and did the chairs all the way up to junior warden. And before moving to senior warden position, I kind of had a conflict with the new line for the following year. So I wasn't very content of the lodge. So I decided, maybe this is not the right lodge for me. And I decided to look around. And I joined a lodge here in California called Palisades Lodge. Palisades Lodge was a very old lodge with a lot of money in the bank. I mean, they have almost $10 million in the bank when I joined the lodge. Just to find out after I joined that they're going to be, the Grand Lodge was going to take their charter away and close the lodge, and it would become part of Santa Monica Palisades 307. And the reason it's called Santa Monica Palisades because Palisades Lodge became part of it. So this is a Santa Monica Palisades, a big lodge. You know, they have their own building, have their whole association. And I decided when I was at Palisades, I said, well, how much would be a life membership? I said, well, life membership is like, in our lodge is like, for your age, like $1,700. I was like, well, that's cheap. You know, most lodges like $6,000-$7,000. So I said, okay, let me buy a life membership. So when it transfers to 307, well, they'll take all the money from Palisades, will become part of 307, but I will have my life membership in 307. So I said, that sounds good. So I joined, became a life member at Palisades. When they went over to Santa Monica 307 and became Santa Monica Palisades 307, they got all the money, but I also got my life membership there. So that was a great deal for me, because if I buy a life membership at most lodges, like let's say Santa Monica Palisades, if I buy a life membership, it would cost me probably around $7,000 for my age range. You know, so me paying, you know, $1,700 was a great deal. And then I found LA 42. Obviously, I could not stay a member at Palisades since it closed. And I said, well, let me join LA 42. You know, this is the only lodge in LA that has the name of the city, Los Angeles, number 42. And it's the oldest lodge in LA. You know, it dates from 1853. Obviously a different location from the original location, which was on Alvarado Street downtown. But, you know, it moved around over the years, and we had a lot of governors, a lot of famous people were member of that lodge over the years since the beginning. And actually also Commandery number 9, which is here in Los Angeles, probably the largest commandery that we have, was started by members of LA 42 in 1890 or something like that. So it's, you know, being such a famous lodge and being such the oldest lodge, I think for me it was kind of the right way to try to affiliate with that lodge, and I did. And right away they put me in as senior warden, so I could continue my progressive line toward becoming a master. And when I finished my year as senior warden, I was obviously elected to be master in 2019, which was my first year as master. And I was obviously became a past master at the end of 2019. 2020, I stayed master. I was elected master again. 2021, I was elected master. And now 2022, I am still the sitting master. I guess in my mind, I feel like, you know, people enjoy me being a leader. And I think that in a lodge, it's important to have harmony. And in my lodge, at least in my lodge, we have harmony, as you noticed. People enjoy each other. People like to talk with each other. There's no ever discomfort while we're in lodge and between members. That's really, really important, and makes my life easier as the worshipful master of leading the members and the lodge in the right direction, which I've been doing. And now we're going to be having a nice progressive line continuing forward.
You talked about the history of Los Angeles Lodge, and you know, one thing that's really struck me since visiting LA, especially visiting LA for the purposes of Freemasonry and the podcast, is just how connected Freemasonry seems to be to the history of Los Angeles and like the surrounding areas. I mean, there's so many Masonic temples, some of which are still active as temples, some of which are used to record the Jimmy Kimmel show or as recording studios. I mean, it seems amazing to me how interwoven Freemasonry and Hollywood and Los Angeles and California seem to be, far more so than I ever thought. I mean, to your knowledge, I mean, were these connections kind of formed in the old Hollywood studio system, where a lot of people working
Yeah,
in the studios, Freemasons, and because I picture it as kind of like a Sunset Boulevard type of Freemasonry, where all the actors and movie stars and stuff and producers were joining. Just what do you know about that history and that connection between Freemasonry and Los Angeles and Hollywood?
well, I'm not sure when you were here if you had time to go visit the Shrine Auditorium downtown LA, but no, okay, well, that's one place you missed. The Shrine Auditorium is obviously a huge building. I mean, huge building. And they do have a yearly film award there, or they used to. I'm not sure they still do. They used to. Hollywood and Los Angeles is always in relation with the film business, the movie business, and a little bit about the music business, and so in Los Angeles and Hollywood, a lot of famous actors were actually Masons. A lot of famous people were actually Masons. A lot of them, actually, if you look at the history of the shrines, you have a huge number of famous people in the film industry, in the government, in politics, that were in music, that were Masons or are Mason, depending if they're still alive or not. And I think this is part of the history of the Los Angeles Masons. I think the being a star or being famous, as you know, in the 60s, Masonry was booming. In 2021, well, it's a lot less booming, but it's still very active into many lodges. And some lodge are great, like mine. I think mine is great. And some lodge have problems. They have problems. They have groups. They make groups and against each other. And that's it's so unmasonic to me. I mean, it is something that I try to stay away from it, and I try to tell my members to stay away from that. But overall, I think the history of the Masons in Hollywood, in LA, not just Hollywood, in Los Angeles, is based on a lot of celebrities and like that.
And one thing I have to give credit to, not that anybody from the Jimmy Kimmel Show or Hollywood is watching this, but I really, really appreciated the fact that they've kept the Masonic touches and Masonic significance, of the buildings, at least in the facades. I mean, the Hollywood Masonic Temple across from the Chinese Theater where they filmed the Jimmy Kimmel Show, it still has the square compasses on it. It still has the inscription, Freemasonry builds its temples in nations and in the hearts of men, right there, and the Village Studios, which I had the chance to tour. It's an amazing recording studio that was a vintage 1920s Masonic Temple. It still has, Masonic Temple written on the front. And that's something, because unfortunately we are in Canada, United States, everywhere, we are losing Masonic temples. They're being sold by the lodges that, own them. And I always really appreciate when the new buyers take the time to try to preserve some of those Masonic characteristics of the building, as opposed to tearing it down, which is always a shame when that happens.
Well, we have here one of the lodges, local lodges, who's actually just sold their building. Unfortunately, Ionic Composite on La Cienega, which Beverly Hills Lodge and Ionic Composite meets in the Ionic Composite building. They just sold their building, so they are moving into a different lodge to do their work, the work of this great craft. But will the new owner keep the building the way it is? I have no idea. I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, the Los Angeles Valley Scottish Rite, a humongous, absolutely gorgeous building with statues and things on the facade that are amazing. I mean, and that's on Wilshire Boulevard. Maybe you didn't see that also. The building was sold unfortunately, and purchased by the two guys that own, I think, Levi's jeans. Well, they used to own Levi's jeans. They bought it and made it turn it into a museum, but they never changed anything of the outside facade, which is great because when you drive on Wilshire and you go towards Koreatown and downtown, before you arrive there, you'll see it on the left side, on the north side of Wilshire, you'll see this humongous building that takes an entire block. And you see all the statues and all the Masonic emblems all over the building. And it absolutely is gorgeous to see, even though it does not belong to the Los Angeles Scottish Rite, which is my valley, any longer for many years. It's still beautiful to see it, just like you say with the building on Hollywood Boulevard.
Yeah, it just makes me think about Chicago. I can't think of the name of it now. I knew it. It was called, up until about 4 years ago, the Oriental Theater, and they changed it. But that was in the Loop in Chicago. That was built as a Masonic temple. It was the biggest Masonic temple in the world before Detroit took it over. But it was sold by the Masons. But the owners of that theater were good enough to leave the facade intact, so you can still see the square compasses on it. But you compare that to the South Chicago Masonic Temple, which was just torn down, which is a real shame.
Well, probably the reason it was called the Oriental Theater is because, as you know, the masters sit in the Orient. If in the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite degrees, that's what it says. I mean, in English it says we sit in the East, but in French or in Scottish Rite, ancient accepted, it says you sit in the Orient.
I never thought of that. That's a very good point. I never knew why it was called. It was just it was known as the Oriental Theater until 4 years ago they changed the name of it. I don't know if it came into new ownership, but I never thought of that. It's a very good point. If in that case, it's another kind thing that the new owners did to keep that Masonic connection in place. I wonder, to your knowledge, does Los Angeles have any rules regarding like heritage properties? So
regarding
if
what?
somebody were
I'm sorry.
like heritage properties. So if somebody were to, wanted to, let's say, make changes to the Hollywood Masonic Temple facade and completely modify it, would they be allowed to? Because I know in Canada, in Ontario, we have some strict rules that if your building is a heritage property or older than a certain, I forget the number now, but is of a certain age, it's not easy to make changes to it. You have to try to preserve the historical characteristics of it.
We have the same rule, and I think historical properties. Don't quote me on this, but that's probably from 1920s and before. And I think that changing the facade of a building is almost impossible to do through rules and regulation of the city and county of LA. And it's kind of like everywhere the same. I mean, if you go to France, it's the same thing. You have historical properties that you cannot change facade. A lot of things that were built under Louis XIV or Louis XVI in Paris or in the surrounding of Versailles, where you cannot change outside facade of a building. Easier to do inside, but still there's still a lot of restrictions.
Well, I think that's a good thing because it like preserves some of these Masonic temple facades, which I always appreciate. One word that you've used a few times during this interview that I want to touch on because I really like it and I think it's so relevant to what I'm trying to do with this podcast. You've used the word work, and you've talked about becoming an officer. They put you to work and getting to work with your lodge. That's something I always try to emphasize with this podcast, with new membership, right? Is that Freemasonry, in my opinion, first and foremost, is work. It can be fun and enjoyable, and that's important, but it should also be, there needs to be some effort put into it to make the most of the experience for yourself and for those around you, for your brothers. How do you motivate your lodge as a worship master, how do you motivate your lodge to put in the work necessary to create a fulfilling Masonic experience?
Well, unless you want to stare a rough ashlar the rest of your life, you won't be able to build anything about, we're trying to build ourselves into becoming better person, right? So being lazy or being on a sideline doesn't do any of that. Yes, you're there, you're present, or you don't come, still pay your dues. But as a Mason, when you take your obligations, obviously you're supposed to be involved with the lodge. Remember that as a worshipful master, it's not my lodge. This is a lodge of all the members equally of the lodge. I'm just a person that regulates and rules how the lodge should be guided, but all members should participate. Unfortunately, in lodges today, at least in California, I don't know about the rest of the United States, you have a lot of people that don't come, a lot of sideliners that don't want to do the work and want everybody else to do the work. Well, I try to get people motivated to get involved into the lines or on committees of the lodge, because I think the interaction of having a member involved in the life of the lodge will actually make that person less bored than just listening to numbers during a state meeting or how much bills we have to pay. If you get them involved, it gets them an incentive and excitement than just sitting around and just listening to numbers and whatever else we do in stated meeting. So I think that's the motivation behind it. I think members, especially newer member, gets motivated by being involved than just standing there on the north side of the lodge or the south side of the lodge, wherever they decide to sit.
Do you think that motivation can be, or to what extent can and Mason's motivation be external versus internal? So how much can a lodge or worshipful master do to motivate somebody who perhaps is being lazy or not putting in the work? Or do you think that at the end of the day, the motivation does derive first and foremost from the internal qualifications of the person? And if
I
somebody,
think,
okay,
sorry, I think it's both. I mean, I think the external motivation is, when you become an officer, you are obviously wearing that special apron of the lodge, whatever position you are. So this is a motivation for someone who wants to be active in a lodge. That's an external position. But the internal position is you trying to do a better job about yourself than just sitting around doing nothing. So you want to be involved in your internal to advance and to become obviously a better person. And that's your internal part. Your external part, I think, is just people can say, hey, I'm an officer of, let's say, I'm just going to give you an example of Los Angeles 42. I'm a marshal, or I'm a chaplain, or that's a motivation for someone who just likes to act like he's somebody special. But remember that as Masons worldwide, we are all special people. Not everybody can become a Mason. This is not for everyone to be a Mason. But the ones that we have today worldwide are mostly very good people. And I'd said mostly because there is some bad apples everywhere in every groups, and we try our best to guide them into the correct way. This is your internal part. But a person has to want to go in these correct directions. If the person itself doesn't want to go in that correct direction and wants to stay a bad apple, there's nothing someone can do. But remember, you're being guided by the Supreme Being, and that's supposed to that will definitely help if you believe in a Supreme Being, and if you don't, then you shouldn't be a Mason.
That's something interesting, which I haven't really discussed a lot with guests, so it has come up a lot, is the idea of a supreme being and Freemasonry. I think a lot of people who aren't Freemasons, they hear that requirement and they think of Freemasonry as a religion,
Or a sect.
Or a sect. Yeah. I think that they can get kind of confused by that. And one thing I really like that California did, which I learned at Grand Lodge, the communication, we're used to always saying, lodges meet at Masonic Temple. But a temple can have a religious connotation. And I know this because I'm right now working on a series of grants for my home Masonic temple. And several of them, when I say, looking at a grant for Masonic temple, the applications have responded, well, we're a secular grant. We don't grant religious organizations. I have to respond and say, no, it's temple is not used in this sense in a religious connotation. And from what I recall at Grand Lodge, they told me that they had started calling their buildings Masonic halls, Masonic centers. I guess just how would you describe to the public, to the people listening who aren't Freemasons, that supreme being requirement, but also, the differentiation between Freemasonry and a quote unquote religion or a sect?
Well, first of all, religion and Masons do have something in common. I mean, we're not a religious group and we're not a sect, but pretty much everyone has a religion, whatever it is. I don't care. It doesn't matter if you're a Muslim, if you're Jewish, if you're Catholic, Christian, Mormon, I don't know. I mean, any religion you want is okay to be a Mason. If you do have a religion, you should believe in a supreme being. You call him Adonai, you call him Allah, you call him Jesus, you call him whatever you want to call your supreme being, Buddha. It's fine, and you can actually use that particular book on the altar of your religion to take your obligation. Most people would just use the regular Christian Bible, but it's not obligated. You can do other books on the altar while you do your obligations, right?
And even just I'm not sure if you've seen this, but not even books. We in Canada had a First Nations brother join, and he had an eagle feather placed on the altar instead of a book to represent his faith. So it's not just even books, it can be a token. Like I said, the eagle feather, that's the first non-text I've seen. I've seen the Quran, the Torah, but the eagle feather is something I always remember being on the altar. But
yeah, it's a very unique way of taking your obligations on this particular token. But like I say, we're not a religious group. We are related to religion. You need to believe in a supreme being, like I said, to be a Mason. This is mostly the only main obligation of being a Mason. You have to believe in a supreme being and an afterlife. We took out in California the restriction of living in California for at least a year. This used to be on your application. It's no longer part of that. You can be living in Canada today and still be a member of a California lodge. As an example, Los Angeles 42, as I said, being probably the most famous and the most old and the oldest lodge in Los Angeles, we try to be the Masonic lodge for the world. What does that mean? Well, I decided that I wanted to have members from other countries to join my lodge. Is that easy to do? No, it's not easy to do, because why would somebody from another country wants to affiliate with a lodge in LA? Well, you'll be shocked. But here we go with the external values of being a Mason. You know, how many people wants to show on their thing, hey, I'm a member of a lodge in Los Angeles. I'm a member of Los Angeles Lodge 42, and I live in Bulgaria, or I live in Romania, you know, and I live in Mexico, you know. Well, this is a way that if they do travel to Los Angeles in their lifetime, hopefully more than once, they have a home away from home. This would be part of their lot. They are an affiliated member of Los Angeles 42. So today we have members from the Grand Line of Mexico. We have people from the Grand Line, 2 members of the Grand Line of the Grand Lodge of Russia. We have Romanian members. We try to attract this type of members to come and join Los Angeles Lodge 42. For us, I think it's very special to have see the cultural difference between members from other countries. And normally, I mean, pretty much, especially European lodges, they use a different rites that we do, but they're still recognized by the Grand Lodge of California. So if they are still recognized by the Grand Lodge of California, they can join a lodge in the United States, at least in California, through our Grand Lodge. And you have a lot of different things that they have to submit before able to affiliate. But we have members from all over now, and this is great. And when they come to town, they have a lodge away, a new home away from their own Masonic lodge in whatever country they come from. And for us, I think it's become more prestigious. Plus, it's an income. You know, I mean, you have to remember that lodge is also a business. You know, it's not like we're not here to make money, but we do have expenses. So you have people that coming from other countries that are helping the bottom line of any lodges. You know, kind of like a country club. You have country clubs, golf country club, where you have, you know, US members, overseas members belonging to clubs in Scotland and Ireland, whatever else. Well, it definitely helped the bottom line. You know, they may not have a say, so they're not part of the line. They're not part of they're not pillars officer of a lodge, but they are still members, and their voice counts.
I'm just wondering, as you're speaking, that brought to mind something. You know, in Ontario, our in-person Masonic meetings were suspended in February of 2020, and they were just starting the process of reopening now. We did, you know, move to the virtual space, as I know many lodges did, and that was really interesting because a lot of members who, you know, joined but then moved away for whatever reason, moved away from Harmony Lodge from Windsor, Ontario, you know, we started to reconnect with them virtually because they were able to attend the virtual meetings while they couldn't attend in person. For these members that, you know, are members of the lodge but not living in California, while California Freemasonry had moved into the virtual sphere, to what extent did you find were you able to reconnect with these members? Did they join in virtual meetings? Was it an opportunity to maybe connect with some members who had traveled far away? If there is a silver lining to, in my opinion, if there is a silver lining to, you know, the horror show that is COVID, it's that through the virtual space, we've been able to increase our visitation and reconnect with some members who we couldn't see in person. I'm just curious if California had the same experience.
I can give you the experience of at least of LA 42. During the COVID times, since we closed after the March stated meeting of 2020, and we never reopened until July of 2021. So you think about 16 months of closure is a long time. So it was great that the Grand Lodge of California did install a resolution that we can do, like you say, virtual meeting using Zoom or other applications, Google Meet or whatever. And saying that, I still think that the interaction of brothers in person is way more efficacious and present than using Zoom. But in the meantime, if we didn't have this online meeting, stated meeting, or obviously that's about all we could do during COVID, we could not ballot on people, we could not accept application. Actually, no, we could accept application, but we couldn't ballot on people. A lot of things were obviously determined by, we were stuck in a lot of things we could do, but at least we had some kind of interaction with our Masonic members. And I think without it, it would be a really lost cause. So I think the Grand Lodge of California went the correct way by allowing us to do online meetings, so we don't lose touch between masters, wardens, and members of the lodge. In the other hand, when they decided to reopen in July of 2021, I wanted to have nothing to do with online meetings. I wanted to go and meet back in person in lodge, even so there were, in the beginning, a lot of restrictions, which have been loosened since then. Because I think this craft, the member of the craft, need interaction with each other in real, not just on online meeting. Now, there was a resolution this year at the Grand Lodge, as you attended, that was trying to pass to allow masters to do both, which means that during an actual stated meeting, you could actually have in same time a Zoom meeting, so people can attend that are not local, that still live far away, just being online. Unfortunately, that did not pass. And the deal was that the camera of the Zoom meeting would only be on the masters, not the rest of the lodge. So people can keep their secrecy of being Masons. But in any case, that didn't pass. So now you have to choose between online meeting or regular meeting. And I think there's a huge difference between brothers. Being able to interact live within each other is, I think, to the utmost importance. And if we go back into a stated problem of COVID and we have to go back to Zoom, then we do have that position to use.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting point to bring up. It's, knock on wood, we're on the downhill side of this, but you never know when the next emergency is going to happen, when the next pandemic, when the next whatever it is. And like you said, it was a struggle, I think, in many jurisdictions, but another silver lining perhaps is that Freemasonry has shown that it's able to weather a storm like this, and is able to handle having meetings suspended. We know that we can continue the business of Freemasonry and the work of Freemasonry, even if we're not able to meet in person, though it's not preferable. So that does give me a sense of comfort that if and when, because it's always a matter of time, when the next emergency hits, it's nice to know Freemasonry will be able to weather that storm as well.
Yeah, and this reminds me very much of the master's lecture, the G lecture on the second degree. Actually, when they talk about Masonry, it still survived. And even so, we have this huge problem worldwide, where, like you said, in Canada, maybe just starting to meet again in person. But a lot of places, a lot of lodges around the world, especially like in Europe, they still cannot meet in person. They still closed because it's COVID. It's a major problem worldwide, not just for lodge, but for traveling, for businesses, for everything. And hopefully and as you know, as you've noticed in the past year and a half or so, 2 years, Masonry is still here. We still survive. I do think we have a lot of members left the craft because they miss the interaction of being within each other's friendship, brotherhood. But there's also a lot of members that are still here, and a lot of people that actually are new, that want to try and see if they should become a Mason. And obviously we have to watch our wastegate and make sure that we don't let anyone in Masonry. Like I said, it's not for everybody, but it's good. We shall continue.
Will Masonry survive forever, do you think? Or nothing will survive forever, because eventually the planet's going to disintegrate when the sun expands. But until such time as, so long as there is a planet Earth revolving around sun, do you think Masonry will survive?
Well, if there's a will, there's a chance. I think the only way Masonry would completely die if the government took over and decided to stop Masonry or become illegal. And there was a time where it was like that, and it still survived. But to my opinion, us as Masons, we have a will to continue our work in this great craft, and for that reason, I think Masonry will survive. Again, that all depends on the government agencies around the world. If they do block it, like in China, you cannot have Masons, so they have no Masons. They have no Masons in China, in mainland China. The Grand Lodge of China is actually located in Taiwan. They do have a very beautiful, huge lodge in Hong Kong, actually in the most expensive street of Hong Kong. But in mainland China, there's no Masons. It's blocked by the government. So if all the government's agencies worldwide do the same thing, no, Masonry will not survive. But if there's a will, there's a way. And I think for the moment, Masonry will survive.
It's, certainly that survival in a large part will be thanks to the work being done in lodges such as yours, and the excellent degrees and the excellent officers. I just wanted to say, thank you again for the hospitality that you showed, getting to see the beautiful Santa Monica Masonic Center. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous building you have. And then also the excellent work done by your lodge. I definitely hope to return, and maybe I can bring a few more Canadians with me. But thank you so much for not only for being on the podcast, but I guess, yeah, ever since, during the pandemic when we met online and I got to see you in a few Zoom meetings, and, just thank you for always being so hospitable towards a Canadian brother.
We're hospitable to any brothers. If they are under our jurisdiction, no problem. We really enjoyed having you in lodge, last week. I think it was really awesome for us to, again, meet you and see a different way of doing degrees, as you showed us from the East and from that lecture. And overall, we enjoy meeting brothers from all over. I think it's great. This is what the craft is about. In America, we are a great craft, but if you go to like Philippines, they're really tight. They really take care of you. If you're a Mason, you're definitely not going to get any trouble. If you in Bulgaria, if you know the right people, you're never going to get into trouble. They'll really take care of you, and this is what we are. We are a team of brothers that takes care of each other under the fatherhood of God.
And I think that is a perfect place to leave it. Worshipful sir, thank you so much again. And I look forward to coming back to really it's an amazing city, Los Angeles and Santa Monica, and seeing you again. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Worshipful.